guys. Okay, next unit. So what we're going to be starting in the next unit is geology. And so we're going to call it the history of Earth. Okay. Now, you're going to be doing your definition in your words. Remember, we are not copying these words. The first time you watch this video, please be in Edpuzzle. The first time you watch this video, you need to watch it in Edpuzzle so you can get credit for watching this video. Okay? So we are going to start with the first word, which is the fossil record. And the fossil record is a historical, physical being of layers in the Earth's surface that we can look at the things that lived or are in there that lived long ago, and we can use the layers to identify more or less when they existed in the history of our planet. And that's really complicated. But basically, it's the layers of the Earth and the living things that we can identify in those layers that makes us learn about what lived when. This has taken a lot and hundreds of years, okay, for human beings to look at all these different layers around the world. And to this day, we're still fine-tuning it over time. Okay, next word. Geologic time scale. Geologic time scale is the system that we use to measure time in the stratigraphy, the layers of the rock in the world. And the perfect example of this is the Grand Canyon, right? And we can look back in time at the layers that are visible and the way that the Colorado River has cut through the soil. And we can see these layers over time. And we can see fossils and the type of minerals. We can see when meteors landed, when volcanoes exploded, in layers of the soil in geologic time scale. Okay, so let's go on to the next word. The law of superposition. Now, the law of superposition is a scientific law that states that the lower a layer is in the Earth, the older the fossils are. Okay, so as new layers come on top, so there was mud, and then there was ash, and then there were a bunch of river came and it was on top of there for a while. So we got like different kinds of soil from the river that was washing down from the mountain. Then the oceans rose, and so there was sand on top of it. Then the oceans receded, so now we have soil again. And so all these layers, as the newer layers get on top and the older layers are on the bottom, this is the law of superposition. Okay, let's move on to the next word. Rock strata. Rock strata are the layers, each individual layer. And each one is a little bit different. They might look really similar because they're from the same time period or they were made from similar things, but each one is a little bit different over time. And you can see how fine these layers are within this example in this image. So rock strata are the actual layers that have the same composition. So they're made of the same stuff. And you can see that how they're kind of close together and they're really similar in color. And then the color changes and then there's a bunch of layers. So the ones that are similar are the rock strata. The next word we have is diversity. We've been hearing this word a lot lately, okay? Diversity is having many different types or many different forms of a similar thing. Like people, we're all different colors, we're all different sizes, we come in different diversity. We are different. There's many different kinds of us. Just like there's many different types of fish, many different types of goldfish even, okay? So it's having a lot of different kinds of something. Perspectives, ideas, not just how we look, but different ways of thinking, okay? Diversity. Extinction. That means this is no longer living. It's gone forever. These are just some examples of animals that were extinct a long time ago. Right now, we are going through a mass extinction on Earth. We are going through our 6th mass extinction that we're aware of, where a large number of species are being killed off on planet Earth. And we are the cause of this last extinction. Okay? So the woolly mammoth, the dodo bird, a thylacine, which was like a fox, not like a fox, like a tiger thing, velociraptors from like Jurassic Park. These are things that no longer in existence. Right now, the black rhino is just going extinct. Okay? Another example. We've already seen that word. Okay, now the next word is fossils. The mineralization remains of organisms, showing how long dead the organism, when the organism lived, how their bodies were structured. We can learn from there. Remember, fossils are not just the remains, but they can be any kind of evidence of that thing living. For example, a footprint can be a fossil. Even though it's not made of any part of the animal when it lived, we can determine where it was, the time period it existed at, how it possibly walked or moved, depending on the spacing between the footprints or how deep they went into how the structure of the foot is. All these things can be determined, and they can come from fossils. The next word is petrification. Petrification is the formation of fossils as stone replaces the decaying tissue. And so what happens is that this living thing gets squished in between different types of soils. And gradually, it gets really hard around it. And gradually, that shell, as it decayed in this example, was replaced with rock. And as the more pressure came on it, the more solidified the shape of it. And it is actually made of rock, but it's in the shape that a shell was made in. So we couldn't take a sample of this and get its DNA or anything out of it because it is actually a rock, but it's in the shape of a shell that existed at some point. The next word is sedimentary layers. Rock layers are successfully deposited, one layer on top of the other, right? And they all have different mineral compositions. And these different layers are called sedimentary. You guys remember when we learned about rocks last year in the 7th grade, we learned about sedimentary rocks, rocks that were made from layers of soil that got compacted and made them into what they are. So these are what sedimentary layers are. The next word is anatomy. Anatomy is the study of the structure of organisms and their hidden parts, okay? So in anatomy, here we have a human being, right? We know this is a skeleton of a human being. And using this, we can study what we ate, how we moved, how big we were, when we lived, when we look at these fossils from human bodies or from any other kind of species. When we look at their anatomy, we can make determinations. From this, you can tell that we walked on 2 legs, right? Okay. The next vocabulary word is comparative anatomy. Now, comparative anatomy is when we study similarities in structures and differences between some species and other species. And right here in the image that we have, you can see it's a really good example of a human hand and how we have similar bone structures to a cat, to a whale, and to a bat. And these are all different animals that have evolved from a common ancestor. Somebody we're related to all millions of years ago, hundreds of thousands of years ago, that we have evolved to have similar parts and similar bone structures. For example, we all have one bone here in this part of the arm. We all have 2 bones in this part of our arm or wing or leg. And then we have these bones here that are the first part of your hand, that are the same, that are green in this picture. And then the ends of our fingers, which are blue in these pictures. And you can see that we have similarities. Mammals who use these as flippers now still have all these bones inside them. And one of the biggest ways that we figured this out was that some whales still have hip bones inside where they don't even have fins or anything anymore. Interesting, huh? The next word is embryo. Embryo is the developing organism from fertilization to birth. And as we go through development, from the time of insemination, we evolve and we look very, very similar. And if we were in class, we'd do a lab with these cards, but we'll figure something else out for this. But you can see here a fish, a reptile, a human, and a bird. When we're embryos, we kind of look really similar. And because of this, we can determine that we have similar common ancestors. The next word is embryological development. And this is how we develop from an embryo, from fertilization to becoming a fetus. Okay? And so once we're born, we're no longer an embryo, right? At the end of the 9 months, when that baby comes out, we are no longer an embryo. But when we are inside the mom and we are growing so that we can come outside, we are considered an embryo. And this is the development and how we get bigger and bigger inside. And every different species that is born from inside the mother and not laid in an egg or laid in very small or in seeds, we mature inside the mother and we grow. And that period of time is different for each species. The next word is species. Species is a group of organisms that are similar. But the most important thing that makes something a species is that it can breed. That means it can have babies together. Once two things have evolved to be so different that they cannot have children together, then they are no longer the same species. So a population can be separated. We have some that live on one side of the hill and some other mice that live on this side of the hill. As long as every now and again one might meet up and have babies, they're still the same species, even if they can look completely differently. But once they meet up and they can't have babies anymore, then they are no longer the same species and they become two separate species. And this is how species develop over time. The next word is adaptation. Adaptation is a process by which a population becomes more suited to living in its environment. Okay? For example, one of the best examples of this is these moths that lived in England. And these moths lived on white tree trunks. You know how some trees are white trunks, others have brown trunks. In this forest, the trees had white trunks. And these moths were white predominantly. And every now and again, they'd have a brown moth that would show up in the population. And they would get eaten by the birds because the birds could see the moth because it was brown on the white trunk. But the genes were in the moths, and every now and again you'd get a brown or you'd get like a brown speckled because that's how they'd really blend really well. So the ones who had like brown speckles were like really blending well. And so they needed to have those brown genes. But when one of the moths was born with like a lot of the brown, then the birds would eat them. So there was like this balance. Having a little brown was good, but having a lot of brown was bad. And having no brown was really bad too, because then the birds would see you more likely. So the Industrial Revolution happened. And for those of you who have learned about it in your history class, in your social studies class, in your geography class, you have learned that a lot of coal got shot into the air and all the tree trunks turned black because we didn't know about the environment then. We didn't know we had to take care of it. And all of a sudden, all the moths that just had a little bit of brown or no brown at all got eaten by the birds. And all the ones who were completely brown, the birds didn't eat. And so over time, because those that had the white genes died off, those moths came completely brown, and they very rarely ever had a white moth. And if a white moth was born, then it got eaten really quickly. So it never had a chance to have babies. And this happens over and over for different adaptations that happen over time. And these species evolve to be able to successfully breed and live in an area. This beautiful chameleon in the picture that we see really matches in with those palm leaf right behind it. And it can hide from predators who want to eat it. Because to somebody, it tastes good. Okay, let's move to the next word. Generation. Now, organisms of the same species that are at the same level of descent from a common ancestor, I know that sounds fancy, but it's just that generation. Like your grandparents are all that generation. And your parents and their siblings, your aunts and uncles, they're all from one generation. And you and your cousins, you're all from one generation. And when you guys get old enough to have your own children, your children will be from their own generation. And each generation has offspring with members of their generation, and it goes down and down. This is a generation. It's just talking about where in your family you end. Right now, you guys are like the last generation, right? And when you get really old, you'll be the oldest generation when you guys are grandparents. The next word is genetic variation. This is the variety of genes that combine to create a population. That means just like we are all different colors and heights, and we have different color hair and different kinds of hair, curly hair, wavy hair, straight hair, big eyebrows, little eyebrows, brown eyes, blue eyes, green eyes, right? Connected ears, disconnected ears. All these different combinations are what make you, you. And by having genetic diversity, genetic variation in a population, your population is stronger. For example, COVID. COVID gets some people and makes them very, very sick. And other people get it and they don't even show that they have it. They just walk around and they give it to everybody they know, and they didn't even know they were sick. Because our population has huge genetic variation, COVID affects us all differently because we all are different, not just from the things that you can see, but from the different proteins and the way your muscles are made and the way your heart works and all the different chemicals that make up your blood. They're different. We function and work differently. And because of that, it makes us a stronger and more successful species. The next word is natural selection. Now, natural selection is kind of like what I was talking about with those moths. Natural selection is a process where the environment is more favorable to different characteristics that we have as a species than other things. For example, in this picture, we see that the birds really can see those red beetles. They must be tasty for those birds. Kind of gross if you think about it, but they like them. So they can see those red birds much easier on the tree than those yellow beetles, right? So those red beetles really can be seen really well by birds, and those yellow beetles can't be seen very well. And so what happens is the birds will eat the red ones because they can see them. And so less red beetles will have less babies, so that the next generation, their babies, will be more yellow than red. And over time, the red beetles will disappear. The next word we have is population. And we've had population as a word before, but let's go over it again. Population is a group of interacting individuals that live in the same area that are from the same species. For example, we are a Winton Middle School population. We might all be in different places right now, but normally we're all together in the same spot, and we are a set population, the people who go to Winton Middle School every day. And finally, I know you're all dying, the last vocabulary word, trait. A trait is a characteristic that an organism can have that is in a species that can be generally acquired by the next generation. Okay? So, how you look. When you look in the mirror or you look at pictures of your parents when they were young, you can see a lot of things the same. When I was younger, my nephew thought that I was grandma, and when he was looking at my mother's wedding pictures, he thought those were pictures of me, not pictures of his grandma. Because when grandma was younger, she looked just like me because I'm her daughter. And so when he would look at his grandma's pictures when she was young, he would think it was his mom or it was his aunt. When you look at pictures of your parents when they were young, it probably looks kind of like you. Like you're like, gosh, am I going to look like my dad when I get older? Oh no. But you know what? You might. And these are called traits. These are just different characteristics that you have that look like your parents. And we know that we inherit them from them because we come from them. Okay? All right, guys. If this is the first time you've watched it and you watched it on YouTube, you need to go back and watch it on Edpuzzle. Remember that you need to complete all 3 parts of your vocabulary form. You need to have the definition in your own words, and you need to have the application. So you either have a picture, related words, or a sentence, depend on what was asked for. You do not just get to do whatever you wanted to. And if you need to see this video again, follow the YouTube link and watch it as many times as you need to. Have a great day.